Hello, reading room, and Merry Christmas Eve to everybody. It is December 24th. I know one of those Christmas Eves, I think it was, or Christmas Day, one of those two, who knows. I read in front of the fireplace. Wasn't that fun? It was for me. I just loved it. I just thought that that was like, I don't know, cozy. Let's get to it. We're reading Black Looks. And we are on. Did we get to chapter 4? Whoo, this is a long book. Long chapters. Nope, we did not. We're on chapter 3, Revolutionary Black Women. While I strongly agree with Radford Hill's insistence that Black critical thinkers engaged in feminist movement develop strategies that directly address the concerns of our diverse Black communities, she constructs an either-or proposition that obscures the diversity of our experiences and locations. For those Black women who live and work in predominantly white settings, and of course the reality is that most Black women work jobs where their supervisors are white women and men, it is an appropriate and necessary political project for them to work at critical interrogations and interventions that address white racism. Such efforts do not preclude simultaneous work in Black communities. Evocations of an essentialist notion of Black identity seek to deny the extent to which all Black folk must engage with whites as well as exclude individuals from Blackness whose perspectives, values, or lifestyles may differ from a totalizing notion of Black experience that sees only those folk who live in segregated communities or have little contact with whites as authentically Black. Radford Hill's essay is most insightful when she addresses the crisis of Black womanhood, stating that the extent to which Black feminists can articulate and solve the crisis of Black womanhood is the extent to which Black women will undergo a feminist transformation. The crisis, Radford Hill describes, is a crisis of identity and subjectivity. When the major struggle Black women addressed was opposition to racism, and the goal of that struggle was equality in the existing social structures, when most Black folks were poor and lived in racially segregated neighborhoods, gender roles for Black women were more clearly defined. We had a place in the struggle as well as a place in the social institutions of our communities. It was easier for Black women to chart the journey of selfhood with few job options in the segregated labor force. Most Black women knew that they would be engaged in service work or become teachers. Today's Black women has more options, even though most of the barriers that would keep her from exercising those options are still in place. Racial integration, economic changes in Black class relations, the impact of consumer capitalism, as well as male-centered contemporary Black liberation struggle, which devalued the contributions of Black females, and a feminist movement which called into question idealized notions of womanhood, have radically altered Black female reality. For many Black women, especially the underclass, the dream of racial equality was intimately linked with the fantasy that once the struggle was over, Black women would be able to assume conventional sexist gender roles. To some extent, there is a crisis in Black womanhood because most Black women have not responded to those changes by radically reinventing themselves, by developing new maps to chart future journeys. And more crucially, more Black women have not responded to this crisis by developing critical consciousness, by becoming engaged in radical movements for social change. They have so demonized, in fact, legalized or imposed law, legalism, onto radicalism, haven't they? Woo! We don't like having any more of those 1960s hippies around here. That's for doggone sure. Now, that was a cop. I know they sound a lot alike. A Southern cop, clearly. When we examine the lives of individual Black women who did indeed respond to contemporary changes, we see just how difficult it is for Black women to construct radical subjectivity. Too powerful. Now, you know what? I'm going to just stop for a minute right there so that you have an understanding of what she's saying, because she's used that term a few times. And it takes a minute for it to sink in with me. It likely takes a minute to sink in with you. So Black women construct, we see just how difficult it is for Black women to construct radical subjectivity. Subjectivity that I don't like the word there was a word I was going to use. I started to say a different word and now I lost the word and I don't like that word. Radical subjectivity is subjectivity that you see from your own standpoint, from your own experiences, right? So your experience of radical behavior is subjective to you. That seems way too radical for me. Okay, you define your radical behavior. I mean, as things go, what I'm doing is not very radical. Getting on for what looks like a few people. Not very radical. That's a little radical that I continue to get on over and over again for what looks like, a big goose egg. That's a little radical. But what I do, far from radical. I teach, and I'm, what's radical about it is that I'm a pretty GD good teacher. Right? Stick my fucking face on everything. That was always my complaint about Oprah's magazine. She has her face on. I did not have my face on most of those episodes. But YouTube says differently. And she could kill you with the wink of her eye. That is the way the song goes. A little rough around the edges. Two powerful autobiographies of radical Black women were published in the early 1970s. In 1970, Shirley Chisholm published Unbought and Unbossed, chronicling the events that led to her becoming the first Black congresswoman. In 1974, Angela Davis, an autobiography, was published. Both accounts demonstrate that the construction of radical Black female subjectivity is rooted in a willingness to go against the grain. Though many folks may not see Chisholm as a radical, she was one of the first Black female leaders to speak against sexism, stressing in the introduction of her book, "Of my two handicaps, being female put many more obstacles in my path than being Black." Yeah. I don't know. That's a powerful statement. Woo! Because Black men really can fit in. If they don't, come on. They're like, Egyptian gods. Hard not to fit in. Somewhere. Where? In a sandwich of females. Of Cleopatras. An outspoken advocate of reproductive and abortion rights, Chisholm responded to Black males who were not opposed to compulsory pregnancy for Black women by arguing, "Which is more like genocide? I have asked some of my Black brothers, this, the way we are, or the conditions I am fighting for, in which the full range of family planning service is fully available to women of all classes and colors, starting with effective contraception and extending to safe legal termination of undesired pregnancies at a price they can afford. Yeah, I mean, common sense back in what? 70 years ago? Come on. Come on! Another thing I want to say is it's not Angela Davis, Angie Dickinson. I want to see if she has an autobiography. That is really a lost art. And I can see why. As a kid, snore. You have a 280-page book over here, right? If I'm lucky. And most of it is about, getting there to the lesson and getting there to the lesson and getting there. But I would believe that if she were to really write her true story, I bet that would be a really good one. She really reminded me, she looked just like my Aunt Lynn, and reminded me, and I swear to God, she had that outfit, the one with the crisscross all the way down the leg. I remember that as a very little kid. I'm telling you, I was surrounded by them. I just wasn't a good actress. Militant in her response to racism, Chisholm also stressed the need for education for critical consciousness to help eradicate internalized racism. And I think I always knew I was never a good actress. I'm a great director, though. I don't know. I'm a great teacher. It is necessary for our generation to repudiate Carver and all the lesser-known Black leaders who cooperated with the white design to keep their people down. We need none of their kind today. Someday, when God willing, the struggle is over and its bitterness has faded, those men and women may be rediscovered and given their just due for working as best they could see to do in their time and place for their brothers and sisters. That's radical subjectivity. That's it right there. And it's a beautiful thing. Many people will criticize it, right? I could see where your criticism comes. It's been a long time and it's not enough. It's not your plan. See the Bookless classroom today. Holy shit, not your plan. But at present, their influence is pernicious, and where they still control education in the North or the South, they must be replaced with educators who are ready to demand full equality for the oppressed races and fight for it at any cost. Hey, brother, right there, you better fist bump me and have your children and grandchildren watching this damn program. No matter. That is Shirley Chisholm. Chisholm. Look up that autobiography. Somebody must have kicked her ass somewhere down the line. As a radical Black female subject who would not allow herself to be the puppet of any group, Chisholm was often harassed, mocked, and ridiculed by colleagues. Psychological terrorism was often the weapon used to try to and coerce her into silence, to convince her she knew nothing about politics, or worse yet, that she was crazy. You fucking assholes. You fucking assholes with your same goddamn plan. Often her colleagues described her as mad if she took positions they could not understand or would not have taken. Radical Black female subjects are constantly labeled crazy by those who hope to undermine our personal power and our ability to influence others. Fear of being seen as insane may be a major factor keeping Black women from expressing their most radical selves, which is why it's easier for me. A little bit easier, and that's all it's about. It's not about not having a Black woman rise to the occasion. It's about who's easier to talk to. And I'm also easier to talk to than most men. That's all it's about. a form that's just a little bit easier to talk to for one reason or another, right? Because I don't have missing teeth, you jackasses. Oh, what's that? While this hurt and angered, it would have wounded me more if had I not understood the ways this appellation is used by those in power to keep the powerless in their place. Remembering Chisholm's experience, I knew that I was not alone in confronting racist, sexist attacks that are meant to silence. Knowing that Chisholm claimed her right to subjectivity without apology inspires me to maintain courage. Recently rereading the autobiography of Angela Davis, I was awed by her courage. I could appreciate the obstacles she confronted and her capacity to endure and preserve in a new way. Reading this work in my teens, her courage seemed like no big deal. And see, that's very familiar to me as well, that I reread it as I was preparing for this book. After, which was really a summary of that, those conferences, those girl conferences. Yeah. That I did for OCC. Really, really did like that school a lot. A lot. That's where it's at, honestly. And then you go into your profession after that with a little more guidance. Certainly for my knowledge, I needed that much schooling for my, because it takes a while for it to sink in too, right? It takes 3 times. So if you take, Psych 101, you get personality. Then you take social psychology, you get personality. And then you take personality and you get personality. I took all 3. And then some. All right, so yeah, I have that memory of not only reading it the second time and reading it in high school or early college, one of the two. No, but I think it was high school because I was like a real feminist when I was younger, and not a radical feminist, a feminist. So that was my radical subjectivity. I was a feminist, not a radical feminist. Oh my God, I love men way too much. I do. At the beginning of the work, Davis eschews any attempt to see herself as exceptional. Framing the narrative in this way, it is easy for readers to ignore the specificity of her experience. In fact, very few black females at the time had gone to radical high schools where they learned about socialism or traveled to Europe and studied at Sorbonne. Yet Davis insists that her situation is like that of all black people. This gesture of solidarity, though important, at times obscures the reality that Davis's radical understanding of politics was learned, as was her critical consciousness, and that's radical subjectivity. It's learned, it's your experience. You don't turn your experience into something radically different. No, you turn your experience into something radical. Radical thinking, radical mental exercises. Not your motherfucking Nazi mental exercises either, you jackasses. I'm having a heyday on Christmas Eve because I see a big goose egg there. So I think WTF. Had she voiced her solidarity with underclass black people while simultaneously stressing the importance of learning, of broadening one's perspective, she would have shared with black females tools that enable one to be a radical subject. I remember thinking that and coming to that conclusion. What are we supposed to do? You have to tell us what to do. Like Isaiah did in chapter 1, cleanse yourselves, you dirty pigs. Okay. Like Chisholm, Davis confronted sexism when she fully committed herself to working for political change. Now, this I want to show you as a teacher is what this literary genius did here, bell hooks. All right? Here's a visual. How these effing things come together is only predestination. We were talking about that in Bookless a little bit. Okay, that was really a good thought that was just lost. Oh, too bad. Oh well. That was a good one. I was getting full of myself anyway. I was thinking about my family. I was. I was thinking about my Aunt Lynn being not Angela Davis. Oh, I remember. And coming to that same conclusion. Yes, exactly. Where were the tools? See Isaiah, he had some tools. Cleanse yourself. Shut up, little piggy. That was one of the best things I've ever heard him say. I mean, it was inappropriate, but just in the scheme of things, when you've got nothing else to say, that still works. I became acquainted very early with the widespread presence of an unfortunate syndrome among some black male activists, namely to confuse their political activity with an assertion of their maleness. They saw, and some continue to see, black manhood as something separate from black womanhood. These men view black women as a threat to their attainment of manhood, especially those black women who take initiative and work to become leaders in their own right. And you could see where that would really break up the rhythm of a black man, for sure. Yeah. Working in the radical black liberation movement, Davis constantly confronted and challenged sexism, even as she critiqued the pervasive racism in mainstream feminist movement. Reading her autobiography, it is clear that reading and studying played a tremendous role in shaping her radical political consciousness. Yet Davis understood that one need to go beyond books and work collectively with comrades for social change. She critiqued self-focused work to emphasize the value of working in solidarity. And this is, again, the strategy of keeping me apart. So the collective work with comrades is what brings about real social change. So here's what she's saying. Floating from activity to activity was no revolutionary anything. Individual activity, sporadic and disconnected, is not revolutionary work. Serious revolutionary work consists of persistent and methodical efforts through a collective of other revolutionaries to organize the masses for action. So it consists of persistent and methodical efforts. This is my effort. It's a single effort, right? It is one small avenue of an effort, but I am persistent. I am methodical about it, right? About the same message from the very beginning. And that's why I am not just um, existing. I am thriving. I am flourishing, right? It's not because of this that I'm flourishing, though. It's because of this that I'm flourishing, right? And that is the benefit of radical subjectivity. It never has to be out of bounds if it's not out of bounds for you. But if that's your box, it's this small or it's this big, you are working at it methodically. Sometimes I see the box that I'm working in as being universal. Maybe it's just this room. It's methodical, it's practical, it's radical subjectivity for me. And that's, to me, why it's successful. It's in my own environment. Don't make me get out of my environment, except, to see my fucking family. And that was a big fuck you to who's keeping me from my family. Just letting you know. It wasn't an F you to my family. They know that. Despite limited options, Davis's decision to advocate communism was an uncommon and radical choice. When the Davis autobiography was written, she was 30 years old. Her most militant expression of subjectivity erupted in her 20s, made into a cultural icon, a gesture that was not in line with her insistence on the importance of collectivity and fellowship. She came to be represented in mass media as an exceptional Black woman. Her experience was not seen as a model young Black women could learn from. Many parents pointed to the prison sentence and served as reason enough for Black women not to follow in her footsteps. Black males who wanted the movement to be male-centered were not trying to encourage other Black women to be on the left, to fully commit themselves to a revolutionary Black liberation struggle. At public appearances, Angela Davis was not and is not flanked by other Black women on the left. Constantly projected as an isolated figure, her presence, her continued commitment to critical thinking and critical pedagogy has not had the galvanizing impact on Black females that it could have. And I remember that too. Nobody even knows who the hell she is. And I read her autobiography a couple times at least. I think I tried it the third time. I at least partially read it a third time. Though young Black women adore Davis, they do not often read her work nor seek to follow her example. They adore her because she's beautiful. Yet learning about those Black women who have dared to assert radical subjectivity is a necessary part of Black female self-actualization. Coming to power, to selfhood, to radical subjectivity cannot happen in isolation. Or it can, but it didn't start that way. Not 100%. That's just torture and scientists. Black women need to study with the writings, both critical and autobiographical, of those women who have developed their potential and chosen to be radical subjects. Critical pedagogy, the sharing of information and knowledge by Black women with Black women, is crucial for the development of radical Black female subjectivity, not because Black women can only learn from one another, but because the circumstances of racism, sexism, and class exploitation ensure the other groups will not necessarily seek to further our self-determination. The process requires of us a great honesty about how we live. Black females, especially students who are searching for answers about the social formation of identity, want to know how radical Black women think, but they also want to know about our habits of being. Willingness to share openly one's personal experience ensures that one will not be made into a deified icon. When Black females learn about my life, they also learn about the mistakes I make, the contradictions. They come to know my limitations as well as my strengths. They cannot dehumanize me by placing me on a pedestal. Sharing the contradictions of our lives, we help each other learn how to grapple with contradictions as part of the process of becoming a critical thinker, a radical subject. The lives of Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Septima Clark, Lucy Parson, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, Angela Davis, Bernice Reagan, Alice Walker, Audre Lorde, and countless others bear witness to the difficulty of developing radical Black female subjectivity, even as they attest to the joy and triumph of living with a decolorized mind and participating in ongoing resistance struggle. The narratives of Black women who have militantly engaged in radical struggles for change offer insights. They let us know the conditions that enable the construction of radical Black female subjectivity, as well as obstacles that impede its development. In most cases, radical Black female subjects have willingly changed the status quo and gone against the grain. Despite the popularity of Angela Davis as a cultural icon, most Black women are punished and suffer when they make choices that go against the prevailing social sense of what a Black woman should be and do. Most radical Black female subjects are not caught up in consumer capitalism. Living simply is often the price one pays for choosing to be different. It was no accident that Zora Neale Hurston died poor. Radical Black female subjects have had to educate ourselves for critical consciousness, reading, studying, engaging in critical pedagogy, transgressing boundaries to acquire the knowledge we need. Those rare radical Black women who have started organizations and groups are attempting to build a collective base that will support and enable their work. Many of these Black women create sites of resistance that are far removed from conservatizing institutions in order to sustain their radical commitments. Those of us who remain in institutions that do not support our efforts to be radical subjects are daily assaulted. We preserve because we believe our presence is needed, is important. Developing a feminist consciousness is a crucial part of the process by which one asserts radical Black female subjectivity. Whether she called herself a feminist or not, there is no radical Black woman subject who has not been forced to confront the challenge sexism. If, however, the individual struggle is not connected to a larger feminist movement, then every Black woman finds herself reinventing strategies to cope when we should be leaving a legacy of feminist resistance that can nourish, sustain, and guide other Black women and men. Which is so interesting, right? Because what she doesn't do, although it is stated by her presence on that cover, but what she doesn't do is call this a book of feminism. She calls this a book about Black people, first of all, by Black looks, not Black female looks, although you can insinuate that by the author. That's it. This is a book about feminism. That's what this book is about. And furthermore, had she that's not what I wanted to highlight. Said it, had she said this was a book about feminism, nobody would have ever read it, right? It would have been feminist class, not where it belonged, in class about race, to introduce you to the real struggle of women, which is a feminist struggle. Remember what she said. She said, of my two handicaps, being female put many more obstacles in my path than being Black. You are always subject to a man's power and his gaze anytime he wants to gaze at you in any way with his tongue hanging out. See Sinterklaas in the Bookless classroom. allowed to behave any way. And to portray that as a black figure is just another sinister way that the Roman Catholic Church gives the big finger to the big middle finger. Those black women who valiantly advocate feminism often bear the brunt of severe critique from other black folks. As radical subjects, the young Michelle Wallace wrote one of the first book-length polemical works on feminism that focused on black folks. She did not become a cultural icon. To a great extent, she was made a pariah. Writing about her experience in politics of location, cinema, theory, literature, ethnicity, sexuality, me, she remembers the pain. I still ponder the book I wrote, Black Macho and Myth of the Superwoman, and the disturbance it caused, how black women are not allowed to establish their own intellectual terrain, to make their own mistakes, to invent their own birthplace in writing. I still ponder my book's righteousness and wrongness, or rightness and wrongness, and how its reception almost destroyed me, so that I vowed never to write political and or theoretical statements about feminism again. I remember that, but more vaguely than the Angela Davis. Wallace suffered in isolation with no group of radical black women rallying to her defense or creating a context where critique would not lead to thrashing. Without a context of critical affirmation, radical black female subjectivity cannot sustain itself. Often black women turn away from the radicalism of their younger days as they age because the isolation, the sense of estrangement from community becomes too difficult to bear. Well, we get older and we have different priorities, and part of that becomes you are part of the production system, and how far up the production ladder do you want to get? Critical affirmation is a concept that embraces both the need to affirm one another and to have a space for critique. Significantly, that critique is not rooted in negative desire to compare, to wound, to thrash. Though I began this piece with critical statements about Audre Lorde's essay, I affirm the value of her work. The eye-to-eye essay remains one of the most insightful discussions of black female interaction. Throughout the essay, Lorde emphasizes the importance of affirmation, encouraging black women to be gentle and affectionate with one another. Tenderness should not simply be a form of care extended to those black women who think as we do. Many of us have been in situations where black females are sweet to the folks in their clique and completely hostile to anyone deemed an outsider. In Eye to Eye, Lorde names this problem, offering strategies black women might use to promote greater regard and respect. She says that black women must love ourselves. Loving ourselves begins with understanding the forces that have produced whatever hostility towards blackness and femaleness that is felt, but it also means learning new ways to think about ourselves. Often black women who speak the most about love and sisterhood are deeply attached to essentialist notions of black female identity that promote a policing of anyone who does not conform. Ironically, of course, the only way black women can construct radical subjectivity is by resisting set norms and challenging the politics of domination based on race, class, and sex. Essentialist perspectives on black womanhood often perpetuate the false assumption that black females, simply by living in white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, are radicalized. They do not encourage black women to develop their critical thinking. Individual black women on the left often find their desire to read or write theory to be engaged in critical dialogues with diverse groups mocked and ridiculed. Often I am criticized for studying feminist theory, especially writing by white women. And I am seen as especially naive when I suggest that even though a white woman theorist may be racist, she may also have valuable information that I can learn from. I've said that since I was little. Yeah, that's me for sure. Until Black women fully recognize that we must collectively examine and study our experience from a feminist standpoint, there will always be lags and gaps in the structure of our epistemologies. Where are feminist books on mothering, on sexuality, on feminist film? Where are our feminist books on mothering, on sexuality, on feminist film criticism? Where are our autobiographies that do not falsely represent our reality in the interest of promoting monolithic notions of Black female experience or celebrating how wonderfully we have managed to overcome oppression? Through autobiography or any type of confessional narrative, though autobiography or any type of confessional narrative is often devalued in North American letters, this genre has always had a privileged place in African American literary history. As a literature of resistance, confessional narratives by Black folks were didactic. More narratives by Black women who are struggling to be self-actualized and to become radical subjects are needed as guides, as texts that affirm our fellowship with one another. I need not feel isolated if I know that there are other comrades with similar experiences. I learn from their strategies of resistance and from their recording of mistakes. Even as the number of novels published by Black women increase, this writing cannot be either a substitute for theory or for autobiographical narrative. Radical Black women need to tell our stories. We cannot document our experience enough. Works like Lemon Swamp, Balm in Gilead, Ready from Within, and Every Goodbye Ain't Gone, though very different, and certainly not all narratives of radical Black female subjectivity, enable readers to understand the complexity and diversity of Black female experience. There are few contemporary autobiographies by Black women on the left. We need to hear more courageous Black women who have gone against the grain to assert nonconformist politics and habits of being. Folks like Toni Cade Bambara, Gloria Joseph, Faye Harrison, June Jordan, and so many others. These voices can give testimony and share the process of transformation Black women undergo to emerge as radical subjects. Black females need to know who our revolutionary comrades are. Speaking about her commitment to revolution, Angela Davis notes, "For me, revolution was never an interim thing to do. Before settling down, it was no fashionable club with newly minted jargon or a new kind of social life, made thrilling by risk and confrontation, made glamorous by costume. Revolution is a serious thing, the most serious thing about a revolutionary's life. When one commits oneself to the struggle, it must be for a lifetime." So, the thing about, like, for example, an autobiography of Angela Davis that would focus on her radicalism that was early in her life and not later in her life is really a call to radical subjectivity, right? I mean, her life as an adult, and I really relate to this because I had very feminist ideas when I was younger, but that did not exclude men by any stretch of the imagination, nor did it exclude traditional Christian ideas of a woman's place in her family. Radical subjectivity, not subjectively speaking, not very radical for a lot of people. So writing an autobiography like Angela Davis's that would have focused on her radicalism early on wouldn't have much to say about her motherhood in the same context. Right? But she knows, like I know, that period was not up for discussion for anyone, for use, for abuse during my period. I don't care what you think about it. This is my period. Now, I know people manipulated that for all kinds of reasons, especially a narrative of a radical feminist and what she might do. That was their favorite narrative to put on me. But when you go into peace and conflict classes and psychology to the nature that I do, it really just doesn't make any sense to try and pin something that is so radically different than my radicalism. So, Angela Davis notes in her book. Oh, we already said that. We already read that. The crisis of Black womanhood can only be addressed by development of resistance struggles that emphasize the importance of decolonizing our minds, developing critical consciousness. Feminist politics can be an integral part of a renewed Black liberation struggle. Black women, particularly those of us who have chosen radical subjectivity, can move toward revolutionary social change that will address the diversity of our experiences and our needs, collectively bringing our knowledge, resources, skills, and wisdom to one another. We make the site where radical Black female subjectivity can be nurtured and sustained. And this is why the commandment is twofold. Love God above all else and love your brother as yourself, your neighbor as yourself, because collectively you can bring your knowledge, resources, and skills and wisdom to one another and make these radical, godlike, miraculous changes. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Don't forget that they really did malign the welfare queen with 23 public checks totaling $8,000 with 1% of the corruption just in the fingerprinting department. No attention to the loss of $150 billion to tax evasion and white-collar crime, 81% of the $300 billion in the savings and loan bailout. Sound familiar? Sounds familiar. Well, if you own the banks, then you know who to bail out. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks so much for joining me here on this Christmas Eve. I know we don't have bells, but we do have some pretty scenery over there, right? I know sometimes it doesn't feel like Christmas here in the classroom, but maybe we need radical subjectivity when it comes to our ideas about Christmas. Thanks so much for joining me here today in the classroom, where all three of our classes are really taking a look at what Christmas means in our spirit, in this time, and really in our lives. Thanks so much for joining me here in the classroom, the reading room.